What's up, guys? It's Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to PXA Peeks at Drifting Lands. This comes from sort of a small team in France called Alkemi Games, and when I saw the pitch for this, I was very interested in it because they kind of pitched this as a side-scrolling shmup that has RPG elements in it, and that kind of tweaked the back of my brain a little bit because it reminded me, and this sort of menu screen here might make you feel similarly if you're an old school gamer like me. It reminded me of games kind of like Raptor Call of Shadows from back in the DOS era, which was very much like that. It was a shmup. It was actually a vertical shmup, but it had like loot in it and missions, and you sort of banked money from doing these missions that you could use to upgrade your ship and stuff, and it was a really, really cool idea at the time. And this came across very much like that, and I was like, ooh, okay, that interests me. And well, I put several hours into this so far, and I've been very back and forth on it. It's got some really good ideas here and some execution and clunkiness that I'm frankly not that big a fan of. So the first thing I'm going to show you here is you saw right when the video started, they highly recommend that you play this with a controller. And for the core gameplay, I would tend to agree, except then you have to spend a lot of time in menus, and this is how quick the pointer moves in menus. It's painfully slow, and it makes navigation a real pain. If you use the mouse, way, way easier to get around things quickly. So that I find a little bit strange. In a recent patch, they have added the ability to control your ship with the mouse, though it still definitely doesn't play as well that way as it does with a controller. So there's the thing there. So there's multiple screens here when you're in this menu. So you're going to see here that you've got a hangar, a market, and a command center. So there are a number of different ships in this. There's going to be a lot to talk about here because one of the interesting things with this game is it has a fair amount of RPG depth to it, actually. So you get to pick a ship at the start of the game. There's 3 different classes of ship, and I started with the Marauder, but you can actually, there's 3 different kinds of ships. There's the Interceptor, the Marauder, and the Sentinel. And it's basically that the Sentinel is a very defense-focused ship, the Marauder is kind of the balanced one, and the Interceptor is the stronger attacking ship that can't take much damage. That's, it's kind of the idea. They all have different stats, and as you progress in the game and get to different levels, you can unlock better classes of that, or you can buy better classes of that. We'll talk about these grades things later. And they all have different statistics. Now, I started with the Marauder, I ended up switching to the Sentinel. But you can sort of go as you want. You can buy into the other class for very little money, so it's actually pretty easy to switch if you ever want to. Though the tricky part is that each ship has their own equipment and that you have to maintain, and you can set yourself back quite a ways if you decide to sort of respec from scratch, but we'll also get to that later. So as you can see here, there's quite a number of different things. You've got engines, you've got armor, you've got guns, you have a helmet, you have CPU chips, you have thrusters, power cells, shields, and you can buy and craft new versions of these if you want, but most of what you're going to be using is stuff that you're going to pick up on the battlefield. The loot is where stuff really comes in handy here, and you take care of all that over here in the marketplace. So when you do a mission, which we will be doing shortly, you can pick up you will pick up a bunch of different loot that you then have to transfer out of your ship into your stash. It doesn't just appear here for reasons I don't quite understand. And you can either equip the stuff, you can sell it, or sometimes you'll pick up blueprints as well, which allows you to craft things sort of at whatever quantity you want. And you can also take existing items and trash them and turn them into blueprints if you want. Thus far, admittedly, I'm not too far in the game, but the blueprints I've found not terribly useful thus far. The vast majority of them are not really worth it. They're very low-end weapons. There are certain missions where you have to basically deliver items, and sometimes you can craft the items you need for a given mission, so maybe it's more useful in that context, but it hasn't been great here. So you have all the different categories you see you could look through here, and this is a loot game, so there's different categories of loot which are colorized that help you sort of determine whether something's rare or not, though that's not always what you want, because in some cases I have had items that have a yellow or a blue tint to them that aren't as good as just a standard item. There's also this here, the fast reboot chip. This is a very rare item I managed to pick up off the battlefield, which I'm kind of happy about. So you have to juggle a lot of this, and you're going to spend a lot of time in these menus in between missions. So the other thing I didn't show you here in the hangar is there's also skills and attributes. So you've got structure, power, and navigation. You see I'm hovering over them here. That gives you a little bit of an explanation. They all give you health, but they all give you some other benefits as well. And items will greatly affect these. The items that you pick up can either add or subtract. Sometimes, you know, like this one here, this engine added 8 navigation, right? So you can see how the math works out here, like 20 plus 18. So you can very wildly affect the capabilities of your ship with the items that you have. You can also spend money to buy attribute points, and those are permanent. So that's sort of adding to the base that you will add to with other items. So you need to keep an eye on that as well. And there is a maximum amount of points you can eventually spend here, as you can see. And then there's the skills. So when you're playing in the main game, you have a main gun that you'll be firing, but you can also have up to 4 active skills and 2 passive skills. So these vary wildly. So they're all in different categories here. So you see we have blade skills, detonation skills, bubble skills, and you can apply these on, and these are tied to the face buttons on the controller. So you can lay these out however you like, and they're quite a bit different. So focus fire it basically narrows the focus of my gun and increases its intensity for a short period of time. Combat reflexes is bullet time. Flame blade allows you to sort of burst your ship forward into things and do damage to people. And magnetic spear is a really handy one. I've been experimenting with the spear one. I'm actually going to change this back to the main one, which is the plasma spear here, which I actually quite like, which allows you to sort of burst a spear out of your ship in any direction that you hold the controller, or that you hold the controller while holding down the button. It's kind of cool. And there's different levels of these skills that you can unlock, but you have to get to different grades, which is basically different tiers of missions that we'll show you later here. And these change the gameplay quite a bit, I'll be honest with you. I have found some to be more useful than others, but you can do quite a bit with these, and there's a lot of customizability here, and you can really do a lot with your ship if you like. And then you have auto skills, which are the passive skills. So these are skills that are either always active or activate when necessary. So you see here, this is a close range one, the one that I have here, close range extraction. When you destroy an enemy in close range and the skill is available, your target will always drop an energy crystal. We'll get into that stuff. The one thing I really don't like here is, so there's something called survivor skills. And so essentially what happens in this, so when you have a shield and you have health when you're playing a mission. If you're about to die, you can try to retreat from the battlefield if you want, which takes a certain amount of time, but will allow you to bail out of a mission midway. It will count as a failure, but you'll get to keep everything that you dropped. If you have the automatic retreat selected, when you die or are about to die, you will automatically retreat from the battlefield, so you won't have to worry about it, and you won't get to keep anything from that mission. If you do not always have this skill equipped, i.e. always taking up one of your passive slots, you're essentially playing in hardcore mode. So if you die, you completely die, which means your ship is destroyed, you'll be given another base one for free, you lose all your equipment, and you have to respec completely from scratch. I did this at one point, and it set me back almost 2 hours of progress, having to regrind old missions over and over and over again in order to earn enough to get myself back to where I was, which I just managed to do before I started recording. That was not fun at all, and I really think there should be a more elegant way to do this. Having to have a passive skill always in use by this just to make sure that you don't get screwed, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that, but anyway, all right, I've spent enough time in menus here. Unfortunately, I am demonstrating the experience, and this is one of the problems. You are going to spend a lot of time in menus in this game. All right, so here's the sort of main map where you get to choose your mission. So you remember I talked about grades. So yes, these are grades of missions, and you can see here I'm sort of switching this around. So as you progress through the story, you will get better and better loot, you will upgrade your ship more and more, and you will get to take on harder and harder missions. There is a lot of content in this game. I've been playing it for about 6 hours, and I'm only partway through grade 2. There are 10 grades, and it takes quite a bit of time, usually multiple hours to get through each one. So if you're going to try to get all the way to the end of this thing, you're going to be here a while. So needless to say, the value proposition in terms of the number of hours that this $20 game gives you is pretty significant, I have to say. There's definitely no shortage to that there. So if you're a gamer on a budget who needs a game to really last, this might be an option for you. Unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of grinding. So I'm going to, let's pick, so this is a mission I've actually already done. You can redo any missions as often as you want. There's also these things here, which are, these are little story beat things. So It's all text. There's no voice acting, and it's all static portraits, though the art here, the hand-drawn art, I really like. I think it looks fantastic. But you're basically going to have, there's different characters sort of in this resistance movement that you're in, and there's some drama that's happening. This is a weird guy who's kidnapped someone that you work with a lot, and you're doing a series of missions to try to get her back. So you kind of get the idea here. You know, you see these things once in a while, and they give a little bit of narrative flavor, but really, I don't know. Maybe things get better later on, but at this point, I have no real interest in the story for this game. I just don't find it all that interesting, to be honest with you. All right, let's just get out of here. So, all right, so we're going to do the first mission here, and off we go. And there are a lot of different types of guns and equipment and skills, as you saw. So these things will play quite a bit differently here. So here we go. Here's my ship. So you fire your gun by pressing the right trigger. It's pretty straightforward. Most of the guns have this kind of really wild, unpredictable spread, which I find kind of frustrating. When you start firing the gun, your spread will be much more concentrated out front. But then as you hold the trigger down, it spreads out, which does allow it to hit multiple enemies at a time, but also it gets a lot weaker per shot because the bullets are not concentrated. I'm not necessarily the world's biggest fan of that, but that's the way the majority of the guns work in this game. So, and then you can use your skills as you go here, which takes out energy. So I was principally using right there that spear skill, which is on the B button. And that allows me to, and you see things get a little bit chaotic here. And so that sort of shoots this fire spear thing out, which I can move around with the analog stick, but while you're firing it, you can't move. There's the spear option. There's what the bullet time looks like. Just improves your ability to dodge in hairy situations. It's definitely handy when you need it. So this is a mission I've done before. This is really frustrating. You have these guys here with their sort of permanent laser beams, and they're very, very strong, so it's very hard to take them out. So that's the thing with a lot of missions, is you don't have to take out every enemy. You will earn more money to upgrade your ship with later by taking out enemies, but you don't have to take everything out or even a certain minimal amount out to pass the mission. And truth be told, there are going to be a large number of situations where it's going to be impossible to take out all the enemies. Like these ships here that are firing these laser things, they're way too strong to take out reliably. So you have to be prepared to dodge some stuff and understand that you're not going to take out everything, but that's also not what the game really expects of you. So when you're using any of these different abilities, you will chew up some energy, which you see there in the bottom right corner. Energy does recharge over time, and in addition to that, enemies will drop it. You've seen a lot of little bits of loot dropping down from the enemies, so they will drop life, they will drop loot, like blueprints and items, they will drop money, and they will drop energy. So that blue crystal there was a piece of energy. So you want to, now they will stay largely permanently on the screen, so you don't have to rush in to get them. I believe they will start to drift off the screen after quite a while if you don't pick them up, but you're definitely not in a huge rush. You see here we've got this sort of minefield thing in the way now that we have to dodge as we go. So this is a later mission in the game. Most of the first grade is pretty easy. You don't really have much risk of dying. That's why I took off that auto retreat power up at one point that kind of screwed me, was because things were kind of gravying along and I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then I was like, oh God, and I got completely hosed. And you see up at the top there as well, it actually shows the number of waves that you're going to have to play. So you have an idea how big a mission is and what you might have to deal with. And any wave that has that little exclamation point on it is an indication that it's going to be extra difficult. So either a really tough wave or a boss enemy or something like that. So you get the idea. Now, one of the other interesting mechanics about this is something called focus. So that's that item on the above the energy meter on the right there that has the big number beside it. That's essentially a bonus multiplier. So if you have, the higher you manage to get your focus up, the more money and loot you will get. So you generally want to do that. Each different ship class ups the multiplier in a different way. This particular class, which is the defensive focused one, it ups by your shield recharging. So essentially what you have to do is actually take damage and wait for your shields to recharge in order to up your focus. So it's kind of like a risk-reward thing. If you want it to go up, you actually have to put yourself in harm's way. I don't know how I feel about that, to be frank about it. I'm kind of like, eh. So you see we completed the mission here. Other ship classes like the Marauder, you actually, there's a focus zone that appears on the screen that moves around. And if you keep your ship within that zone, your focus will charge as well. It just doesn't feel like an elegant solution. All the different ways in which you earn focus in this don't seem very good to me. But the more of it you have, the more money you earn, which is what's handy. So you see here, the resistance keeps the vast majority of it, so you only keep 10% of it. So most missions, you don't actually earn nearly as much as it looks like you're going to. But money goes a long way in this. You can buy most items, as you can see here. Now, these are fairly basic items, but you can see you can buy them for a decent, you know, not a ton of money. Skills up for about 1,000, and you can, you know, buying new skills is about... about 1,000, 1,500 in some cases, though that will get more expensive later, I suspect. But you get more stuff as you go. So here's the loot that I picked up from this mission. It actually wasn't a lot, so I have to transfer it down here. You have to transfer it out of your hold into your stash. It doesn't do that for you automatically. And then you get to sit here and compare stats. So most of this is not all that impressive. This simple power plate is actually better than most of what I've got here at this point. So, well, actually, no, not really compared to most of this stuff. So, yeah, I'm going to sell most of this. So, yeah, you could sell stuff pretty easy. This thing I'm keeping because it looks pretty good, but it requires 43 power, which is why it's red. I can't use it yet. So I'm going to switch back here. So I need 43 power, so I need 5 more, which I can actually buy into. So you know what? We're going to do that. And so these pure cells up your skill power. Wait, what was that? Your energy cell slot is empty for this ship. Oh, except the item I had also added 6 power. So you see, this is what I mean about how it gets really frustrating juggling stuff sometimes with how much it impacts your skill. So in order to have 43 power, I have to have this thing in here right now. So I actually need to buy 6 more on top of what I bought in order to be able to use this thing. And having to do that math in your head is really frustrating. I really wish that items didn't impact attributes so much, because it really makes it frustrating to juggle this stuff sometimes. So anyway, so you kind of see the idea there. So, yeah, so absolve your sins number 2. So you see here, so we did number 1. These are usually mission chains. In addition to that, there are missions like this, which are actually just leaderboard challenges. This is where I actually got screwed before, because the fun part about these challenge missions is that all you're competing for is position on the leaderboards. You don't get any loot, but if you die, you still die. So you get all the penalty with none of the benefit, except competing on leaderboards. So yeah, that was not a terribly fun thing. Also, at certain points, you'll see there's missions here back in grade 1 that have something like this. So these are missions that are multiple chains and go up in different difficulties. And in order to get the proper real rewards from them, you have to complete all 3 of them. So you get like multi-chain missions like that. There haven't been that many in the 2nd grade yet. So let's do Absolve Your Sins 2, and we'll keep going here. And so you sort of see what the idea of this is, right? It's you know, if you're someone who just wants a frantic shmup that's just constant action, this is not what you're looking for. This is definitely a game that is as much about the inventory management and managing loot and managing the math that comes along with said loot as it is about shooting stuff. And I was okay with that because, again, as somebody who really liked games like Raptor Call of Shadows, or even something like Wing Commander Privateer, which this doesn't have the, you know, the level of depth or story or traversal that something like a Privateer does, but it's that same idea. It's the ability of you're doing these core actiony missions, which I enjoy, but you also then get to have the added bonus of really customizing your ship the way you want and min-maxing loot and statistics and all the fun stuff that comes out of an action RPG like a Diablo or something like that. And that sounds, you know, sounded on paper fantastic to me, and it still does. The problem with this game is that everything is... most of the individual parts are good, but I find they don't have a lot of cohesion. And oh, this is a new kind of enemy. Guys who, oh wow, these guys who teleport around. That's very interesting. This is totally new. So we're running into new kinds of enemies, which is nice. I was getting very, very tired with the enemies for a while. There was not that many of them. There was not a lot of variety, and it was getting a little tiresome, but it's neat that we're starting to see more stuff. But this is really the thing. It's a lot of grinding. This can be a long game if you want it to be, as I said, but the reason it can be a long game is because it is exceptionally grindy. You will be doing a lot of the same missions, oftentimes older missions, over and over and over again in order to get the loot that you require, or to get the items or the money that you require in order to be able to tackle the next tough story mission or challenge mission. And that's gonna be a turnoff to some people. I think there's gonna be a lot of grinding. It's a lot of, the level variety in this, I will say, is not very impressive. You're going to be going through, at least within these first couple of grades, you're going to be going through the same couple of levels over and over again in terms of the backgrounds. You will see a lot of the same enemies until you manage to progress in the story, and you don't get to min-max your skills the way you'd really want, because like I said, one of your passive skills always has to be this auto retreat thing, and if you don't have that, you will get yourself set back hours and hours and hours of progress because of one minor slip up. In my case, in one of those challenge missions that don't even reward progression, things like that. And that's going to appeal to a certain type of gamer. There's no doubt about that. And like I said, in terms of raw time, there can be a lot of value in there. But the amount that this game asks you to do and the amount of content it repeats at you, to me, comes across as a little bit excessive. I like the fact that this could probably take 30 to 40 hours to get through to the end of the story, with how the missions ramp up in difficulty, is a little nuts. And that, it's cool for some people, but I don't think I want to grind that long. I just don't have that kind of time anymore. And I mean, even as a shmup, it's fine, but you're seeing what this is. Aside from the repeating environments, this is a very slow horizontal shmup. If you're looking for a bullet hell frantic pace, you're not going to find that here. It's very, very slow. Your ship moves slow. The enemies move slow. There's a lot of, it's a lot of very careful meandering movements, and all right. Ooh, geez, I'm getting myself screwed here. I got to be careful. I'm on the last wave, so I got to watch it here. So, and then, it's not always going to be a super frantic pace, because you're going to get through the mission and then spend 5 minutes in a menu, and you have to spend that time in the menu, because if you don't spend the time juggling your stats and upping things and comparing this item to that item and everything else, well, guess what? You're never going to up yourself enough to be able to complete the next mission. So you really have to do that. And all right, so let's drop all this stuff here and let's see what we got. Yeah, see, a lot of the armor that I'm picking up... See, and this is the thing I don't get. Like, take a look at this armor here, right? It's 113 armor, which is plus 18 over its comparable item within my inventory. But this piece of armor also takes 20 off your armor stat. So technically, based on what this is showing here, this is actually a 2 armor net negative if I were to install this on my ship, which doesn't make any sense. Like, why does armor take armor? And the vast majority of the armor that you will pick up on the battlefield does have that penalty. Doesn't make any friggin' sense to me. Like, why would you ever want that? And like I said, it's just having to balance this, and look at this thing. It looks like this heavy thruster on the surface looks good, right? It has better armor, except look, it takes 62 life. So that's way worse. Now this simple minigun, on the other hand, that I picked up, this thing actually looks really, really good. Almost everything is better except a tiny penalty to my critical hit chance. So that's going in there. So yeah, that was totally worth it. So that's cool. But you see what I mean? It's just not, it doesn't feel like... It doesn't feel like it feels like you have to spend so much time actually doing math in your head to figure out what it is that to make sure that an item that you equip is not actually going to be worse, even though it doesn't really look worse. And the thing I like about games like Diablo is they're very clear about that kind of thing, right? It's very much upfront. This item is better, this item is worse, and here's why. This game is very much like, this item is better, or at least it looks that way, until you sit and do a little bit of calculating and actually know it's substantially worse. And I don't know. That just feels like a little bit too much gymnastics for a game that's really just a shmup with some loot in it. I don't really think that's ideal. So that's... I don't know. That's the conundrum I've been having in trying to critique this game. I had planned to And now you see here, Absolve Your Sins number 3 is difficulty level 14, which it believes is above my pay grade here. So it's basically saying if you do this, there's a very good chance you're going to die. Now, that said, I have done missions that were one level above me and survived it and come out with some pretty good loot on the other side. But there is definitely no guarantee of that. So, and I'll show you what happens here. I mean, if you die, you just go back to the menu and you have to do the whole thing again, having lost everything, unless you can manually retreat out. Which is very hard to do because manually retreating. Actually, I'll show you what happens if you manually retreat.
Processing retreat.
So you see you're on a timer. It's 5 seconds. I thought it was 10 seconds.
Retreat.
So if you want to manually retreat, you've got to do it quick. And you've got to do it well in advance of when you think the mission might fail. But you see I got out here, but as a result of this, I get to keep, now I didn't get very far, but as a result of this, I get to keep everything that I did pick up during that run, though the mission still counted as a failure. Whereas if the auto retreat comes out, I lose all that stuff. So that's the kind of balance you have to make, right? But you can see we're back in the same, the same environment again, fighting, similar enemies, listening to the same handful of songs from the soundtrack. I don't find the soundtrack in this all that interesting. I find it pretty generic and bland. It's never really done that much for me. So, and yeah, there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of repetition in a game like Diablo as well. But in a game like Diablo, you're doing the same actions over and over again, but usually in different environments against different enemies. You're not having to backtrack and repeat the same things over and over again. And that is absolutely what you're doing here. Obviously, this is not Diablo. This is a game made by a small indie team. If you're expecting that level of AAA production value, I mean, that's not what you're going to get out of a game that costs $20. But yeah, the pacing of it is the real problem. It's the fact that it's not a particularly fast actiony shmup, and that you're going to be, and then you're going to spend a few minutes doing a mission, and then you're going to spend a whole bunch of time, arguably longer, in a menu, min-maxing your stats, which you have to do if you want to have a chance of succeeding later on. And you rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And after almost 7 hours of playing this game, I am only partway through the second of 10 grades. So there's, needless to say, a lot of repetition in my future if I wanted to finish this thing. And I'm not sure if I'm going to for that case, in that case. There's never really been, ever since Raptor Call of Shadows, there has not really been another game that's really done what it attempted to do, which was to take the concept of a shmup, which is typically just a raw score attack affair, and turned it into something else, where it tries to make that score attack a bit more of a tangible thing, in that you're able to use your score, as it were, to buy and upgrade your ship and advance yourself in the story. I always thought that was a really cool concept, the idea of taking score attack and turning it into something a little more meaningful. And Raptor did that very well back in the DOS era, made by a very small team. I would not be surprised if the guys from Alkemi, if they were asked, would cite Raptor as one of their chief inspirations with this, because you can see the DNA of Raptor in here. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like it captures that as well. It feels like it's added in too many layers of complexity, and that it's made the game more of a grind than it needs to be. Like, in some ways, I could almost see this. This is not a game with microtransactions, but I could almost see the structure of how this game was constructed working with microtransactions if it was put on mobile. So you see I auto-retreated out there. And that's kind of a bummer because I was almost near the end, but that's because I wasn't really paying attention. So you see, you've lost all your cargo because of the automatic retreat procedure. It can only perform correctly with an empty hold, which is a really weird narrative justification. Retreat manually to avoid losing your cargo, and there you have it. So, yeah, I really feel like if they ever put this game on mobile, they could make it free to play, because with the amount of grinding that's in it, I could certainly see that being a factor in there. So, yeah, I'm conflicted on this. I really love the core concept, but I just think I think the pacing could be better. I think it could be tighter. I really don't like the fact that the game recommends a controller and then makes the controller-based menu such a chore. I don't like the amount of grinding. I don't like that you have to waste a passive skill on making sure that you don't basically lose all your progress when you die once because of bad luck. I don't like the... Ooh, okay, this is pretty good. Let's put this in. Get ourselves some better armor at least. That's nice. Whoops. Wait. What happened there? No. Get in there. All right, cool. So yeah, I don't like that you have to use a passive skill for that. I don't like that that at least at this point in the game, the whole crafting mechanic, and for that matter, the shop in general, seem pretty useless because there's basically nothing you can ever buy that's better than stuff you will pick up on the battlefield. A common problem in ARPGs, to be sure, but you know, one they could have dealt with here better than they did, I think. And the story just seems pretty uninteresting. I really like the artwork, but I'm not a fan of the music, and the story just doesn't seem all that interesting so far. It might get cooler later on. The initial base concept of, you know, the world blowing up and everyone living on these sort of rock islands is cool, but it doesn't seem like they've done too much with it thus far. I might put some more time into it, but I don't know. This is not... I'll have to do a video on Raptor someday just to give you guys an idea of where the DNA of this is, but this is not the... They've got a good idea here. If this game ever does well enough for them to make another one that they can refine and tighten up a bit, it might be better, but I think I'm flaming out on this one, to be honest with you. So yeah, that is Drifting Lands, developed and published by Alkemi Games in 2017. It is out on the PC, on Steam, or PC and Mac for, I believe it's approximately $20. I don't know if it's on consoles. If it is on consoles, I'll put that in the video title, but I don't believe it is at this point. Good concept, but I think they overdid the execution a little bit. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you liked what you saw here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That does help me out a great deal. If you want to watch something else, check out the videos on screen now, and don't forget to follow @PXA Media on Twitter to find out about new stuff first.